compassion. Since from our own experience we understand what other people are going through. So lastly, let's concentrate on the feeling that from now on I will not push away any type of suffering, but rather embrace it when it arises, while at the same time I'll try to avoid creating the causes for future suffering. So then, already mentioned to some degree, so what we'll go through here is kind of similar. So reflecting on the advantages of bearing suffering's hardships, reflecting in particular on the crucial benefits such as liberation, and reflecting on the benefit of dispelling immeasurable suffering. So really we've already did this to some degree, that here, if there's a greater benefit, well, we undergo suffering. Even animals weigh their choices and voluntarily take on some difficulties. If you think about animals going hunting, they do put their life in danger, you know, they go through difficulties, but they do it in order for a long-term benefit. So they do undergo short-term discomfort in order to then have long-term benefit. So we already discussed this previously. But in particular, what's really important is that so far we suffered so often, we suffered so much, but we suffered unnecessarily. Any kind of suffering that we experienced until we met the Dharma, until we practiced the Dharma, just became, well, it may have helped us to some degree, but it was not directed towards liberation or enlightenment. And so here, what we can do is use suffering, for example, to do Tonglen practice, to understand the suffering nature, to really transform it into Dharma, to transform it into understanding impermanence, understanding karma, understanding the First Noble Truth, the truth of suffering, understanding, generating compassion, etc. So therefore, this is here, suffering therefore is not an unwilling, a resigned acceptance, but a joyful willingness to accept the situation and make the best out of it. Okay, so becoming part of the practice. All right, so reflecting on the benefit of dispelling immeasurable suffering, understanding that it's the arising, it's the fruition of a karma, that we have a choice, we can bear the suffering without getting angry and retaliating. So we're actually lucky, because in this situation we get away with the suffering, but then we can choose to transform it into something greater. So on this occasion, Shantideva says, it compares it to us, like if a man is condemned to death, instead of being killed, they just cut off his hand. How lucky would that person feel? So likewise in our situation, actually, if we don't know what to do, which actions to adopt, which actions to refrain from, well then we're pretty much doomed to experience even more problems, more difficulties. But since we have learned to create the causes for more happiness and eliminate or weaken the causes for suffering, we're almost like that. We get away with some suffering, but we can transform it and make it more virtuous. So we're actually very, very lucky that potentially suffering can lead people to more negativity. So when someone experiences suffering, sometimes they become very hateful, very hostile. Whoever caused the suffering, they see that as the main cause, see those as the enemy, want to kill these people, want to destroy these people, and it leads to so much future suffering. So a relatively minor suffering can lead to great other suffering, whereas in our case it's the other way around. We're actually getting away lightly because we have the opportunity to transform our suffering. And however difficult it is initially, it's not difficult to bear suffering if we gradually grow accustomed to it, starting with the small. So whatever suffering there is, there's nothing that doesn't get easier with familiarity. Is everyone alright? She's
She went just for 1 minute. She said she'll come back.
yeah. No, I'm just wondering because maybe he's.
She's a little bit sick.
She's a little sick. What about Nisim? Is he sick?
I think she has some problem. She's okay.
I mean, you can use my toilet, and I mean this toilet there. It's what you can. Everyone can use it. You shouldn't have to walk. I'm gonna say my toilet. If you need to use the bathroom, anyone can use it. So here Shantideva says, there's nothing at all that does not become easier through familiarity. Therefore, from accepting small problems, we will be able to bear great difficulties. So that's an important sentence that Tibetans often cite. I repeat, yeah. There's nothing at all that does not become easier through familiarity. Right? There's nothing. Whatever there is, it can become easier over time. Okay. Alright, so that's it. And Naman Tsongkhapa basically says we should be heroic. We should be like real heroes, and face the difficulties with the mental attitude that protects us from discouragement, etc. So here then a detailed explanation from the viewpoint of the basis. It talks about what kind of suffering we should accept. We don't have the time to go through it. So it just talks about accepting suffering from the point of view of the body, being patient with hardships that are related to acquiring food, clothing, accommodation, in particular when we practice the Dharma. To be patient with regard to the worldly concerns. It's not the 8 worldly concerns here, but it's 4 of them. Being patient with displeasure, loss, disgrace, and blame. Being patient with disintegration, total extinguishment of things. Being patient with sickness, aging, and death. Right? Again, as long as they're there, of course we want to overcome them, but as long as they're there, to just accept them and make the best out of it. Accepting the sufferings of the different physical activities, so walking, moving around, standing, sitting, and lying. So in particular for practice, it's sitting and walking. We should be patient. Yeah. So anyway, so there's a whole list of them. Going begging, you don't really go begging, but it's like one of them is like begging.
It's the worst.
Pardon?
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's.
Can you imagine if you had to go beg?
It's not easy, right? Yeah, I can't imagine. Well, I can to a degree for monks and nuns. It's kind of like, but yeah, it's difficult to beg in the kind of sense that you can't do anything else. But this is here in the context of living a life of austerity and being dependent on others, basically to others taking care of you for your basic needs, especially when you're a practitioner. Anyway, so there's a whole list of 8. They're self-explanatory, not hard to understand. And then the last type of patience is developing the patience of certitude about the teachings, or certitude about the Dharma. So developing certitude with regard to the good qualities of the 3 jewels, because even though I know taking refuge is not one of the favorite kind of topics, but we had this discussion in Neve Shalom about taking refuge. Someone brought it up. It's actually, some people feel it's kind of like they don't like it because it seems like you're just a helpless person and you have to take refuge. You can't do anything on your own. But that doesn't mean that. I mean, it just means to entrust yourself, to rely on something, to rely on...
So it's true. You're actually helpless.
Well, I mean, helpless in the sense...
Wind blows.
No, but there's certain things that we can do, you know? It's like when we take refuge in a building, doesn't mean we cannot cook food or we cannot walk, we cannot talk. I mean, this person made this comment. They said, well, it feels like you're like a baby and you totally have to just entrust yourself. I mean, somehow these words were too difficult, too strong for that person. And you see, like, the teaching on refuge is not very popular with anyone but Tibetans. So not just Israelis, it's also for Westerners. I mean, for other Westerners, it's difficult, you know, like Americans, Europeans. It's difficult for whatever reason. So some people feel like it's too religious. Other people feel this is like you entrust yourself. It's like, what about the whole thing, you standing on your own feet kind of idea? I don't know, different reasons.
I think it's important.
Initially,
We take
please, Leo.
we take refuge anyway, only we don't see it.
Yeah.
Before we meet in Brahma, we take refuge in money,
Yeah,
in other things.
exactly, all the time.
It just opens our mind to
Mhm.
see it.
We need to
So
understand
we
what it
might
really
as
means.
well choose the object in
Yeah.
which we take refuge.
That's very true.
And that's
Consciously,
So
consciously.
it's a
Very true.
shock. It's a shock.
Yeah. Yeah, we take
Money is not
refuge.
reliable and
Exactly, so true. We take refuge in money, very good, in material things. I mean, just, yes.
There's a thinking, especially probably in the West, but
Mhm.
people are afraid of kind of Guruism or Lamaism,
Yeah,
and it's like, and it's part of like, I know people that doesn't know anything about Buddhism, when they hear that I practice Buddhism,
Mhm.
no one can know it, only if people really start to
trust
ask you or talk to
Mhm.
me. And they have all kind of
Misperception.
misperception about the guru.
Yeah.
Especially when we're using the word guru.
Yeah.
Guru is like
Has a negative
a cult
connotation. Yeah.
or something like that.
No, but I'm not even talking about people who are not Buddhist. I'm talking about Buddhists.
And
Even then, for Buddhists, this idea of refuge is a little bit... it's not a favorite topic, let's put it that way.
Initially, I think it's
Yeah.
difficult. It took me about 3 years, for my example,
Yeah.
but I think many people here, it took me 3 years to understand what is Buddhism talking about.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming to listen to a guru, about teacher, about taking
Mm.
refuge. It took me time, but then when I figured out
Yeah.
what's the map and what they offer, and I practiced several things, and I see that it works, and it works wonderfully. Then I was more sure, and I wasn't sure still if I'll take refuge, but then I took refuge, and then when I took refuge, it opens so many doors.
The thing is, like, why I'm asking, why I'm very curious, is because next year the topic is refuge.
Here,
So I want to do it in Israel,
Philosophy or philosophy?
in the philosophy.
ah,
In philosophy, yes. In the philosophy, as part of the philosophy, it's taking refuge. Now, I don't want to dress it up and kind of make it sound like something else, but maybe there's a way in which it can be presented that is still in accordance with what it is, and people understand what it really means. So this is why I'm wondering, I'm asking. I mean, I'm not going to talk about gurus and lamas, actually. It's part of it, but it's explained differently. But, you know, just to understand what it means to, what are the 3 jewels, what does it really mean? Because there's so much more to it. It's not just saying, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But there's so much more to it.
I think part of taking refuge when it's come to precept, probably especially in Judaism, that's precept in Judaism is something that you take, you're not allowed to break it. And in the Buddhism, and all the teachers that I hear talking about that, I mean, it's taking the motivation.
Yes.
Of course, as long as we are in samsara, we're going to break it. But the motivation is to keep this precept.
Yeah, that's important, yeah. Anyway, so I'll talk about this, I guess next year, but it's interesting for me to hear why people find it difficult. Okay, But then, lastly, so here the certitude of the three objects of refuge, certitude about patience with the certitude about the two types of selflessness, the abilities of the Buddha, who the Buddha is in particular, the paramitas, we've done that part, virtuous karma and its results, non-virtuous karma and its results, liberation and enlightenment, and the path and grounds. So all this is part of patience, part of generating patience or cultivating patience with regard to the certitude of the teachings. Yes, and also in general there's also, Polly, if you need to use the bathroom, you can use the bathroom there.
I'm okay now.
Yeah, you okay?
I offer the whichever is needed.
Okay, good. And then the last part of what to get certitude about is about the Buddhist scriptures in general. So there are some topics, 7 topics that were mentioned in particular, but then the last one is just the Buddhist scriptures in general, just to get a good understanding. And then how to practice. Again, you have the 6 supremacies, very similar as before, don't need to be mentioned here. And the 6 perfections, of course, all the other perfections are part of the practice of patience, and that's also mentioned here, don't need to mention it. So, we're done with patience. I have very little time for diligence, I apologize for that. But anyway, let's see how far we can get. Actually, this material on diligence, I taught this before. I taught this in the context of the ornament for clear realization is one of the topics. So I took what is in the Lamrim, gave much more explanation. So the notes that I sent you are much more extensive. Those are the notes that I've made already before.
For what course?
For a course on the Abhisamaya Alamkara in Dharamsala, not here. Not in India, no, in Dharamsala.
Lucky them.
Well,
Is it
but
okay to publish it, to print it as a booklet?
first read it. First make sure you really, I mean, it's like quite a long time ago that I did it, and you can, of course you can, no problem. I give it to you and then it's yours.
PDF.
But I'll just send it on to you. I haven't read, I'm not going to go through the part that deals with the ornament for clear realizations just because we don't have time. I did originally plan to do that, but it's just not realistic. But you'll have it and you can see whether it's beneficial. Anyway, it's a little bit more extensive, I guess, if you read it, because it's not just notes, it's actually written out. In that sense, I also feel more confident that, or feel better about giving you just a short version, because then you can read it at your own time. So, but with regard to the 3 types of, with regard to diligence, again, there's the nature of diligence, or what diligence is. As here, the wording is a little different. The words are a little different because I actually have to use different translations. So in Tibetan it says the nature of diligence. It doesn't say what diligence is. But in the Lamrim Chenmo it translated as what patience is. So the translations I've used previously are always the one from the Lamrim Chenmo in English. And here then it's my own kind of translation, so slightly different. Also in the Lamrim Chenmo it speaks about perseverance or joyous perseverance. So this particular paramita has so many different translations. Joyous effort, enthusiastic effort, enthusiasm, perseverance, joyous perseverance, diligence. I don't know, I chose diligence because it's short. Right? I mean, it's like, we get a sense of what it refers to anyway once we read what it's all about, so I chose the shorter term, diligence, right? So diligence is a mental factor that has the... So first, the nature of diligence, the method for engaging...
Diligence is always joyful?
No, it
Oh,
isn't.
it's not. So
No,
it's
it should be...
pleasant.
Yeah, but in Tibetan the word also doesn't imply it's joyful. You see, the Tibetan word is tsundru, which doesn't have any joy in there. So I thought, well, if it doesn't have it in Tibetan, but you know, because you know the definition, why do we have to have it in English? So it's lovely to use joyous diligence or joyous perseverance or whatever. It just takes too long to write it every time.
Once in a while you can say it.
Yeah, once in a while, that's it, exactly. It's true. The method for engaging in the practice of diligence, so how to begin the practice of diligence, the categories of diligence, how to practice, and the summary, the same as before. So, what is the nature of diligence? What is diligence? Diligence is a mental factor, mental function, that has the aspect of joy, enthusiasm or delight, in Tibetan joa. So again, you see, Chundru is the word for diligence. It doesn't have the word joa in it. Right? Joa means joy. And that focuses on virtue. So experiencing joy when doing something virtuous. Yeah. You got a huge question mark on your face. Like you're disagreeing face, no? No. I know, you're just thinking. Okay.
The Tibetan word doesn't
Has nothing with joy. Chundru doesn't say anything about joy. In the definition, the word is explained, but it doesn't. Chundru. Where's the word joy? I mean, joy is joa. You say chundru. Joa means joy or delight. Joa. You also have like kibu or something like in like colloquial, but the formal word is joa. And then if you use honorific, when you ask a lama, was your vacation happy? You say tobochuse. So that's not kibuchus. You don't say were you happy? You use that particular word. So it's more honorific in ordinary language. But here in this context, it's used to describe enthusiasm, or it's described to describe diligence. So Shantideva says, what is diligence? It is delight in virtue. Okay? So delight is important. Without some joy, without some happiness there, this is what is so important in Buddhism, joy and delight. So we do talk about experiencing hardships, but we should experience those hardships with joy. If we suffer, so if you become ordained, for example, and the day you become ordained, you suffer. If I meet monks and nuns who suffer being ordained, I know they're not going to last. They're not going to last. Unless they're able to transform it. But usually that doesn't happen. If you're very miserable, and not miserable because you're usually a more pessimistic person, or you're not a very happy kind of person, this is also possible. If that's a different reason. But if your ordination, if you feel so restricted and yeah, you feel like it's a burden, you feel restrained and so forth. If that is the reason, so being a nun makes you feel unhappy, or a monk, you will not stay a monk or nun. You need to be joyful. You need to have a certain degree of joy. Of course, there's always hardships, there's always problems, but any Dharma practice, really, we need to find the joy in doing it, with anything, right? So a short feeling of like, oh, this is really difficult, that's okay. But the moment you experience feeling unhappy when you do the Dharma, you need to look for the cause. You need to eliminate the cause, because in the end, you just give up. You're sure to give up. So that's the problem. So it's very important to find joy. And I think Tibetans are really good candidates. They're really good people to do the Dharma, because they're naturally joyful people. They really are joyful people. The most horrible things happen to them. The most terrible things happen to them. What we would make, something that would make us terribly depressed, would lead to great depression. In the case of the Tibetans, they are very easy. They find it very easy to overcome the problem, as in like deal with it in an effective way. Well, it's impermanent, life goes on. They have very beautiful ways of dealing with problems. And so they're so light-hearted that whatever happens, they're still happy and joyful. So they're very good candidates for Dharma practice, I find. So I don't know what was first. The chicken and egg question. Were they joyful first, and that's why the Dharma was effective? Or did the Dharma come to India, to Tibet, and it just, as a people, it made them very joyful? Their whole culture became, I don't know what was first.
Sometimes I think because the life in Tibet is so difficult, Tibet, Ladakh, all
these places.
It's very difficult to live there. Because of the attitude, because of the weather. I mean, you must be very strong and joyful people to survive.
Well, tell you, Germany is really not the nicest place in winter. So actually, my great-great-parents should be really happy people. Because it was also not easy to survive in Germany because of the weather. It's a little warmer, I agree. But, before global warming, we did have our 20 degrees minus.
Finland.
Or Finland. Yeah, actually. I was thinking of the Inuits, but I'm not sure how happy they are, so I didn't want to take that as an example. But I think Germans are not known as the jolliest people in the world, let's put it that way. So,
They have a master's also.
pardon?
They are the big teachers also, the Buddhists, the Tibetan. They are the big teachers who give them an example.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, what I'm saying is, what is the cause? Maybe it really is that either they were already joyful, but I don't know whether it's just the hardships, because I think there are places that just as difficult in the world. I don't think Tibet is the most hardest and harshest place. It is pretty harsh, I agree with you, but I'm sure there are other places. I don't know how pleasant it is to be a Bedouin in the desert, right? Sandstorms and the incredible heat during the day, the incredible cold during the night. Water's a huge problem. You have to deal with camels. I mean, it's not easy, right? I mean, I imagine traditionally. And I don't know, I'm not so sure how joyful they are. They probably are. I mean, a simpler life always is joyful, probably more joyful. But the point is here that maybe the Tibetans, that through Buddhism, their whole culture was transformed. And what I'm trying to say here is that they're good candidates, because whatever happens, they're very light-hearted. So that light-heartedness is very important to do Dharma practice, I believe. Okay, so to find that joy in everything. And I know it's such a cliche, but it is so true. It is so true. Positive thinking, so powerful. I hate saying it. I feel like such an idiot, but it's true. Whenever something happens, what is the benefit? To always check. You train your mind, and like with familiarity, everything gets easier. Train your mind. What's the benefit? Is there something good in this situation? What can I learn from this situation? And before long, you never look at the negative aspect, you look at the positive side.
This is the real refuge. Because people was fine now. Doctor now can say to patient, think positive, but people don't know how to do it.
No, they don't know how to do it, it's true.
So this is the real refuge, is to know how to...
That's true, how to actually do this. So of course but from a Buddhist point of view, everything is relative. So it totally makes sense. There's no absolute happiness, there's no absolute... You can see the good in things because it's totally conventional, right? I mean, it's totally the mind. If our mind wants to do something, we just think, I can't do it. And that's why we don't do it. That's why we can't do it. But the moment we think anything is possible, and you just try it out, wow, you can do it, right? You just try it out. But sometimes we like to be depressed, right? We like to be, I'm like that. We're kind of attached to who we are with all the negative stuff. To recognize that, we're really attached to our problems, sometimes we get attached to a disease or something. We know we should do something, but that's me. It sounds like of identity, so we don't want to let go. So what's the point?
Sumi.
Pardon?
Conflict. There is a great attachment when people are in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
They're attached to the conflict.
Yeah.
Lots of energy, lots of the efforts usually are being put into make them release it. They're not ready to let it go.
I love when Shacha explains this. I know it comes from the university. It's really like,
Yes.
this is like real good quality. Say it again, sorry. Can you say one more time? The last part? Because I was just thinking how wonderful it is.
There are many methods
Uh-huh.
that are being used in order to allow or let people release the conflict or the fight, let it go. Sometimes it becomes a part of their identity.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. So true, yeah. It becomes like a part. I mean, you just need to watch your own mind when there's a problem and you don't really want to use, you have a solution there, you know this is the solution, and you go, oh no, but that's me. That thought is right away. You don't want to deal with the problem, right? Because it's you, yeah. All right, anyway.
I find
Uh-huh.
when I have a lack of joy in the practice,
Yes.
like we talked about it the other day, you said sometimes when we fake
Fake it?
curiosity, we don't really feel if it's real.
Yeah.
And when I encounter this, I check my trust.
Okay.
The teachers do it, the scriptures describe it.
Yes.
Why is it that I find it boring or
Yeah.
not good enough?
Yeah.
And I check my trust. I do it again and I go back to the practice. In everyday life with the Dharma, just because sometimes I forget.
Yeah.
And then what helps me is the sangha. Because the person next to me, you see, the friend of mine once, I called her and they said I have to wait 3 hours in the foreign office to wait for visa and I have to wait 3 hours. How lucky you are.